Chapter 41 Diversion. Kaz stood in the open hatch of the tank. He wore Bruce's Soviet shirt, since his had been destroyed when he'd gotten shot. It was too tight on him, but he didn't plan to get close enough for any sentient to notice. Nona drove the Soviet tank into sight of the first Livermore checkpoint. 4 Soviet jeeps blocked the main road into the town. 6 sentients, Kaz called down into the tank, confirming what they had seen from the hilltop earlier that day. Inside with Valentina were Lena, Mikhail, Julie, and Amanda. Jennifer had not been pleased to be separated from Mikhail, but it hadn't taken much arguing to convince her that he was safest with Kaz's group. He straightened his shoulders, looking straight at the sentients stationed at the checkpoint. Nona pulled the tank to a stop. "Glory to the motherland!" Kaz called out a greeting in Russian, his deep voice booming over the rumble of the tank engine as it drew to a halt near the checkpoint. "Long live the motherland!" He sharply saluted the sentients, mimicking the action he'd seen so many times during his years in the Experimental Science Division. "Glory to the motherland!" A sentient on the ground returned the salute. What looked like shadows on his face were really the gray skin patches found on all sentients. Kaz was thankful for the lack of light in the early hours of the evening. They would not be able to discern if he was a sentient or not. "Where are you coming from, soldier?" "Headquarters in Rossi," Kaz said. He needed to draw the rest of the soldiers forward into the trap. They all lurked near the vehicles and were too spread out. "Some interesting things have occurred there. Have you heard?" "What sort of interesting things?" the soldier asked. Kaz didn't miss the smirk that passed between the soldiers by the jeeps. A few of them sauntered a little closer to the tank. Perfect. "Well, you know," Kaz said. "Evolution, my friends." He gave them a broad grin. "Surely you know what I mean? Why don't you explain it to us?" The soldier was fishing, trying to find out if Kaz was sentient or human. The others sauntered forward into the open. All of them wore the same smirk, and all had the shadowy patches on their skin. If Kaz's eyes were sharper, he was certain he would have been able to make out the redness of their eyes. "Evolution. Surely you know what I mean." Kaz spread his arms wide. "I carry an urgent message for General Petrov. You must let me pass." He said the name of the general without a single wobble of emotion. "General Petrov?" The soldier narrowed his eyes. "General Petrov is not in Livermore." The very fact that he knew the general's name hinted that he was indeed here. The general's name was not known to many who did not work under him. The soldier was testing him. General Petrov had been the head of the Experimental Science Division for over 40 years. If the Livermore lab was truly the center for American national security, General Petrov would be here. He just wouldn't want anyone to know he was here. He'd always been a sneaky, clever bastard. Kaz shook his head and gave the man his own smirk. "Oh, I believe you are correct, sir. General Petrov could not possibly be here." He winked. "But I have message for him just the same. Details about evolution." "Come down where we can see you," the soldier said. "You and everyone in the tank." The men on the ground wanted to be sure Kaz and his companions were sentients. He was certain of their motivation. They probably ate anyone who showed up who was not a sentient. "Fine, fine," Kaz called down into the tank using Russian. "Everybody out. They won't let us pass until they inspect us. They need to assure themselves we are evolved." Kaz stepped up to the next ladder rung in the chute. He used the movement to camouflage what he did next. His hand darted to the gun resting in his waistband. He snatched it out and fired at the lead soldier. The bullet missed the man's head, but it did punch through his chest. Blood sprayed into the evening air as the soldier staggered back in shock. His shot was a signal. The snipers surged to the slot visors and began firing on the sentients. At the same time, 3 mutants surged out of the darkness. Milo ran behind them, screaming, "Die, motherfuckers!" Bullets leaped from his gun as he followed his mutants into battle. Surprise was on their side. The sentient on the ground didn't recover fast enough. Daryl, the adult male mutant, pounced. His hands locked around the sentient's head and smashed it against the pavement. Blood and brains spilled out. More gunfire arched from the slot visors on the side of the tank. 2 more soldiers fell. 3 down, 3 to go. Kaz scrambled the rest of the way into the tank, grabbing the machine gun hanging from the chute's latch. The other 2 mutants attacked, but the element of surprise had been lost. The remaining sentients were ready. Sabrina flung herself at a Soviet, teeth bared. The sentient growled at her in response. He caught her around the neck and flung her to the ground. Sabrina hit so hard she bounced. Something glinted in the sentient's hand. A hammer. It arched through the night, going for Sabrina's head. Kaz fired. At the same time, Milo sprinted headlong at the Soviet. "Motherfucker, don't you touch her! Don't you fucking dare!" Bullets hit the sentients from 2 sides. His head exploded in a spray of red. 2 sentients to go. The boy mutant was locked in a battle with one of them. His sentient also wielded a hammer, swinging it so fast that it blurred. The boy growled and snarled. He tried to dart for the sentient's legs, but every time he got close, the hammer came for him. The boy leaped, going for the sentient's wrist. His teeth sank in. The sentient dropped his hammer as he tried to pry the boy free. Sabrina leaped into the fray. She landed on top of the sentient's shoulder and wrapped both arms over his face. Destabilized by the combined weight of the mutants, the sentient went down. Sabrina began knocking his head against the pavement. The boy joined her, the 2 of them combining their strength. The sentient thrashed, trying to tear them off. He was strong, but he was still outnumbered. 1 second, his torso and arms thrashed. The next, the body shuddered and went still as his head exploded across the pavement. 1 sentient to go. He battled with the father mutant. The 2 of them were locked arm in arm, each trying to overpower the other. A metal wrench lay on the ground between them. Both of them moved fast. There was no way to get a clear shot. "Don't kill him!" Kaz shouted, sliding down the side of the tank. "We need him! Don't—" "Daryl!" Milo dashed in, gun aimed low. "Daryl, man, don't kill him! Just stop moving so I can get a shot!" Daryl howled as the sentient swept his legs out from under him. They rolled across the ground. "Daryl!" Milo bellowed. "God damn it, man, just hold still!" Without warning, the other 2 mutants leaped into the fray. They joined Daryl, the 3 of them attacking the sentient. "Stop them!" Kaz roared. "Milo, stop them!" The dull crack of the sentient's skull sounded. "No, damn it!" Milo said. "Guys, this wasn't the plan. I told you we needed one alive." If the mutants heard or understood Milo, they gave no outward sign. The 3 of them fell on the fresh pile of brains and began feeding. Their grunts and growls of satisfaction made Kaz's stomach turn. "Now we have nothing," Kaz snarled. "No intel on the layout of the lab. No intel on the location of the downtown headquarters. No directions to the shop we need. We have nothing." "That's not true, man," Milo positioned himself between Kaz and his feasting mutants. "We have a way into Livermore, which is more than we had 5 minutes ago, and we can always find some other bastard to torture for information." Kaz's chest heaved with frustration. He had known it was a risk to go into battle with the mutants. He'd seen firsthand how uncontrollable they were when the bloodlust had them. "We should have tried to kill them on our own," he thought. "What's done is done." Valentina spoke tersely from her position in the slot visor. "We can't turn back now. Move the jeeps out of the way." Kaz ground his teeth as Lena, Julie, and Amanda climbed out of the tank. The three of them moved the jeeps to the side so the tank could pass through the checkpoint, and so the other groups would have extra vehicles for the next phase of their plan. They kept one body for the mutants. Milo dragged it into the back of the jeep. After shoving it inside, he pulled out his knife and began to peel the scalp from the undamaged part of the head. Kaz couldn't watch anymore. He joined the girls, helping them drag bodies into a drainage ditch that paralleled the road. In a few minutes, all were out of sight. They took the extra weapons and ammo. No one said anything as Milo herded his mutants into the back of the jeep, where they fell upon the fresh body waiting for them. Chapter 42. Coins. Kaz resumed his position in the turret as Valentina drove the tank. Milo led the way in the jeep, his three mutants in the back. This part of the plan required them to find what Amanda called a hardware store, but no one knew anything about the town, which meant they had to drive around until they found what they needed and hope they didn't get stopped by any patrols between now and then. This could have been avoided if the mutants hadn't killed the last sentient. They drove around the city streets for 30 minutes. Just when the knot of anxiety in Kaz's stomach grew to uncomfortable proportions, Milo led the way into a parking lot. He stopped in front of a shop. "See?" he called up to the tank. "You wanted a motherfucking hardware store? Here you go. We didn't need a Soviet fucker to find this place." He got out of the jeep, standing protectively in front of it. The mutants were all sitting up. The girl licked blood off her fingers. The boy slurped a few chunks of brain from his palm and burped. Darrell leaned his head against the side of the roll bar, eyes slit in contentment. Kaz pursed his lips. It would do no good to argue with Milo. They would just have to find and capture another Soviet. The rest of the crew climbed out of the tank. "Do you have the list?" Kaz asked them. "Yep." Amanda held up a piece of paper. "Propane tanks and glass jars." "As many as you can find," Kaz said. "We're on it. Come on, guys." Amanda, Julie, Valentina, Lena, and Mikhail headed for the shop. The glass doors leading inside had been smashed. Broken flower pots littered the pavement outside. The plants had withered and died. Desiccated pink and purple blooms shifted in the wake of the sniper's footsteps as they slipped into the shop. Kaz remained where he was to keep watch. He did not trust Milo to keep watch alone. He was too preoccupied with his mutants and his new pelt. He kept looking down at it and running his fingers through it. Kaz grunted in malcontent and scanned the parking lot. There was a pile of burned bodies on the far side. Half a dozen cars were in the lot, covered in a thin layer of dirt. Where was General Petrov tonight? Would he be in the downtown headquarters or in the lab? Was he a sentient? What did he think of the side effects of the Nezhet vaccine? Knowing Petrov, he probably embraced it. He'd been the driving force behind the super soldier program. He probably even used the word evolution as Kaz had done with the checkpoint patrol. That sounded like something Petrov would say. Kaz had spent countless hours imagining what it would feel like to kill Petrov with his bare hands. It was the only way to get to sleep on some nights. When he left Russia on a ship bound for America, he had consciously given up that fantasy. America was a big land. Petrov could be anywhere. He could lose focus on his main objective, revenge for his family and all the people murdered in the experimental science division, if he focused solely on Petrov. Petrov was but a single head on a very large, multi-headed monster. The sleeping gas was the best way to disable that beast. He wasn't here to get revenge on Petrov. But what if? What if the bastard was here and he had a chance? Just thinking about it spiked his heart rate.
I would like nothing more than to crush the life from his throat with my bare hands,
Kaz said to himself in Russian. You say something? Milo asked.
Just talking to myself.
Yeah? I'll do that too sometimes.
Milo pulled a pack of cigarettes out of his pocket.
Want one?
I have not seen you smoke before.
I quit a few years ago for my wife. I snagged this pack off a body. You want one or what? He held a cigarette out to Kaz.
Thank you.
Kaz took the cigarette. It eased some of the ire he felt toward the other man. He loved cigarettes when he could get his hands on them. Unfortunately, it had been difficult to get them in northern Russia. Milo struck a lighter and held it out. Kaz leaned forward and lit his cigarette. He savored the first inhalation, loving the feel of the smoke as it filled his throat and lungs. How long had it been since his last cigarette? He couldn't remember. What were you talking to yourself about? Milo blew a plume of white smoke into the air.
I was thinking how much I would like to kill the man responsible for the death of my wife and son.
You know who killed them?
Da.
Milo took a long draft off the cigarette. Lucky man.
How so?
Milo fingered the scalps on his belt. I don't know who killed my wife and son. They were gunned down like animals right outside our house. Sabrina was stuck inside and turned. Another exhalation of white smoke. It hung in front of Milo's face, making him ghost-like in the darkness. I wasn't there for any of it. Took me 3 days to fight my way free of the base and get home. Kaz's gaze slid to the mutants. It was like they had been drugged. The two kids leaned against one another, contented rumbles coming from their throats. Daryl looked like he was sleeping. I know I'm fucked up, Milo said. I know it would be kinder to put them down. He flicked cigarette ashes in the direction of the resting mutants. There's a monster living inside me. Conaway tried to save me, but he could only do so much. Kaz held the smoke in his lungs for long seconds before exhaling.
Tell me, what sort of monster lives within you?
A man who's willing to maim and torture. Not for a greater good, but because it calms me down. That's why I volunteered. I'm no good. Men like me shouldn't be allowed to live. What would Milo think if he knew of all the terrible things Kaz had done in his lifetime? He took another puff of his cigarette.
Do you believe in souls?
Kaz asked. Yes.
You believe your soul will go to heaven when you die?
Milo shrugged his shoulders, as though trying to dislodge something invisible. Maybe. If I get off this mortal coil before I can do more bad things. Maybe God will forgive me if I make this last sacrifice really count for something. Maybe it will erase all the other things I've done. My family, His eyes flicked to the mutants. "We'll all go down together, doing something good. Their deaths will mean something. It's better than shooting them in the fucking head just because they had the bad luck of getting poisoned by the communist bastards. What about you? Do you believe in heaven?"
Heaven?
Kaz exhaled a long stream of smoke.
I don't know. We were taught as children that it was dangerous to believe in God. But I think my wife has been looking over me since she died. I suspect there is such a thing as a soul.
"I know my Claudia looks after me," Milo said. "That's my wife. She leaves coins for me. Look." Milo dug in his pocket, pulling out 6 coins of different sizes and colors. "Each of these was minted in 1978. It's the year we were married." He spread the coins out on top of the tank, pointing to the tiny date at the bottom of each one. "See? 1978. It's not a coincidence. This is how I know she's looking out for me." Kaz felt his lungs constrict as he studied the coins. Sure enough, each one was stamped with the date of 1978. It was hardly scientific proof, just as the bees were not scientific. But despite this, despite his years as a scientist, Kaz found himself grasping onto it.
"Where did you find all these?"
he asked. "Just around, man. Like I'd be squatting in the bushes to take a shit and he would just be there." Milo rolled one of the coins across the backs of his knuckles. "That's how I know, man. That's how I know she's out there with my son. They're all waiting for me and Sabrina. After tonight, I'll be able to meet them with my head held high. If I died right now before doing something great, I don't know what I'd say to them. I'm telling you, I've done bad things." He touched the scalps again. "You can probably tell by looking at me. I can't help it. But I want to stop doing bad things and go out on a high note, you know?" Kaz's ire with Milo had completely melted away. He found himself wanting to offer comfort to this man who had lost a wife and son, the same as Kaz.
"I once worked on a team to develop 2-headed dogs," he said.
Milo gaped at him through the haze of cigarette smoke. "Say that again, man?"
"I once worked on a team to create 2-headed dogs."
"Why the fuck would you do something like that?"
"Orders. It was my job. The general I worked for thought they would be great warriors on the battlefield. A hellhound to scare American fascists into submission."
"That is seriously fucked up." Milo took another long puff. "Just imagine if we had to deal with zombies and hellhounds. I'm not sure any of us would be left."
"Perhaps," Kaz replied, "though you Americans are very resilient."
"How did you do it? How did you make the 2-headed dogs?" Kaz flashed back to the lab. He could still smell the piss from one of the poor animals who died in his arms.
"We grafted the head of one animal onto the back of another."
Even though the memory was grotesque, it hardly compared to the things Kaz and his fellow scientists had done to other human beings. "Did any of them live?" Milo's eyes were wide within the cloud of smoke.
"Never more than a few hours."
Kaz reluctantly snubbed out the last of his cigarette.
"The program was cancelled after 13 months.
What had happened to the soul of the dogs who'd had their heads removed from one body and grafted onto another? Did 2 souls inhabit the same body? Or did the second soul move on to the afterlife once the original body was destroyed? Was that why none of the experiments had succeeded? Why was he even thinking about this? It was in the past. He could not change what he had done. "Why did you let them live?" Milo asked.
Back at the farmhouse. Why did you let my family live?" Cause sighed. "Because I have grown soft since coming to America." "But you wanted to kill them. I saw it in your eyes." "I did not want to kill them, but they are dangerous. Too dangerous." "You lost people," Milo said. "That's why you let them live." Cause shrugged. "Apparently, neither you nor I have the strength to pull the trigger when it is necessary." "We're two fucked up dudes, aren't we?" Cause wasn't sure what a dude was, though he recalled hearing the younger men use that term. He decided he could probably pass for a dude. "Yes, we are quite fucked up." Milo's shoulders started to shake. It took Cause a second to realize he was laughing. Milo coughed and wheezed, trying to suppress his laughter. "What is so funny?" Cause asked. "Ush!" Milo gestured back and forth between them. "This!" He threw his arms wide to take in the parking lot. "I'm having last rites with a fucking Soviet and a pack of cigarettes." He lit a second one and inhaled deeply. "Life is so fucked up. No offense. Want another one?" Cause took the second cigarette and leaned forward to light it off Milo's. "None taken." They sat in silence, enjoying their second cigarettes. "Wonder what's taking them so long?" Milo glanced at the hardware store. "Propane tanks can be bulky," Cause replied. "Maybe they're looking for something to help them move the materials." The sound of an engine had Milo and Cause grabbing their guns. A jeep drove into the intersection nearest the parking lot. Cause held his breath, hoping it would see the tank, assume nothing was wrong, and keep moving. No such luck. Just when he thought the jeep would roll past them, it slowed and turned into the parking lot. The mutant stirred, red eyes flashing in the headlight beams. "Motherfuckers!" Milo clenched the cigarette between his teeth and began to rise. "This is your lucky day, assholes. I'm itching for a fight." "Get down." Cause put a hand between Milo's shoulder blades and pushed him back down. "Put out your cigarette." He ground his own smoke against the side of the jeep before flicking it over the edge. "Why?" Milo put out his own cigarette. "We're going to catch a sentient," Cause replied. Chapter 43. One Alive. Milo grinned like a feral dog. "I'm going to add another scalp to my collection." "Yes, I think so. Follow me. Get your mutants. Try to keep them under control this time."
He hurried toward a smashed glass door adjacent to the hardware store. Milo herded the mutants after him. Glass crunched underfoot as they crept into the shop. The smell of something sickly sweet overpowered Cause's nostrils as he stepped inside. There was apparel on the floor that looked like bathing suits. "Tanning salon," Milo said. "My wife visited one every week. What's the plan?"
"Behind the counter,"
Cause said. Milo ushered his mutants into the dark recesses of the shop. They grunted softly, following his instructions. They appeared more controllable after being recently fed. Too bad keeping them in a state of pliability required a constant supply of brains. Cause took up a position by the front door, concealing himself in the shadow of a large bookshelf that stood next to a shattered window.
"Remember, we need one alive," Cause said. "When I give the signal, turn your mutants loose. They may have any sentient except the one I shoot. Can you explain this to them?"
"I'll try, man." Cause pursed his lips.
"We cannot risk."
"I know, man, I know." While Milo spoke to his mutants in a low voice, Kaz shifted his attention to the approaching Soviets. The men pulled up behind the tank, momentarily disappearing from sight. They called out in Russian, banging on the side of the tank.
"Why are you stopped here?"
A sentient strolled around the tank.
"You know looting isn't allowed. All materials belong to the motherland. Come out and I want to report you. Maybe we can share what you found,
Kaz held his breath, training the crosshairs of his scope on the soldier. Farther back in the shop, Milo had his gun also propped on the counter.
"You must have found something good,
called the soldier.
"Daniel, check inside."
He once again pounded on the side of the tank.
"We saw you from the road. You have cigarettes. You should share them with us."
A second sentient, presumably Daniel, bounded to the top of the tank. He crouched like a spider before drawing his weapon and scuttling to the open hatch. Only a sentient zombie could move with such fluidity.
"Come out, comrades,"
Daniel called into the hatch.
"Don't be greedy. Share your cigarettes with us."
Kaz decided to target the lead soldier. They needed information, and it was always best to get it from the person in charge. A third sentient came around the tank. This one eyed the hardware store, taking in the broken flower pots littering the ground.
"Maybe they went inside,"
he said.
"Perhaps,"
said the lead soldier.
"Go inside and—"
Kaz fired. He didn't aim for the head, but at the legs. His bullets tore through the knees of the sentient. As the man buckled, Kaz aimed again, this time at his thighs. The mutants leaped out from behind the counter in a chorus of howls. Sabrina vaulted right over the top, her bloody blonde hair flying around her head like a halo. They burst through the front of the shop and made right for the downed man.
"No!"
Kaz cried.
"Not him!"
Milo raced out after them.
"Not that one!"
To Kaz's shock, the mutants scattered. They veered around the tank, racing after the other two sentients who fled. Gunfire, screaming, and growling could be heard. Milo sprinted after his family, leaving Kaz alone to deal with the wounded sentient.
"Milo, get back here!"
Kaz was forced to duck as bullets whizzed around his head. The man he'd incapacitated was on his stomach, machine gun aimed at the tanning salon. Kaz returned fire, not aiming to kill, only to quell the attack long enough to figure out a way to subdue and capture the sentient. He picked up a nearby chair and flung it out through the shattered front window. It arched into the night and smacked into the soldier. His gun skittered across the pavement. A figure dashed into the fray. Kaz barely had time to register the slight form of Mikhail as the little boy tore across the parking lot. He held a propane tank between his hands.
"Mikhail!"
Kaz bolted out of the shop, terrified the boy would get himself killed. The soldier was busy tossing aside the chair. There was a bloody gash across his forehead. As he pushed the chair away, Mikhail pounced. He swung the propane tank with all his might and cracked the soldier in the side of the head. It wasn't hard enough to kill him, but it was hard enough to stun him. It was the opening Kaz needed.
"Somebody, help me!"
He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and wrapped it over the man's mouth, working the material into a knot at the back of his head.
"I need rope!"
The rest of the snipers rushed out of the hardware store. The other two Russians were nowhere in sight, and the gunfire had ceased.
"Will these work?"
Julie grabbed something from the front of the tanning salon and ran his way.
"They're swimsuit cover-ups, but—"
Kaz yanked a shirt out of her hand and tore it in half. The sentient began to stir. Kaz slammed the heel of his boot into the man's back and seized his hands. Luckily, he had experience subduing people. In less than 60 seconds, Kaz had the sentient thoroughly bound and gagged. Torn-up shirts secured his wrists and ankles. Blood poured out of his ruined legs, but blood loss wouldn't kill him. How did you do that? Amanda asked, gaping. It's like being at the rodeo, only with a sentient instead of a bull, Julie said.
We are sticking with our original plan, Kaz replied. Capture a sentient for information.
He was glad Anton wasn't here. There would be only one way to get this sentient to talk, and it would involve pain. And since he was a sentient, it would likely involve lots of pain. The sentient made sounds of protest on the ground. He thrashed against his bonds, the muscles of his neck bulging. His teeth worked at the handkerchief. Red eyes glared up at Kaz like a demon. Kaz returned the man's look with a cold stare. Make sure you do a thorough job, Valentina said, voice clipped as she took Mikhail by the hand. I don't want to waste time catching another one.
I agree. Please load the supplies into the jeep. We will be back soon.
Kaz grabbed the struggling sentient by the collar of his uniform and dragged him into the tanning salon. In the sudden silence, he heard the slurping of the mutants as they devoured their next meal on the other side of the tank.
Milo, he called. Get a lantern.
They would need to be able to see for what came next. Chapter 44. Betterment. Kaz felt an old, familiar calm steal over him. It was the calm detachment that had served him in the experimental science division. It returned to him now like a well-worn coat. He mentally shrugged into it, prepared to do what must be done. He and Milo had the sentient in a back room of the tanning salon. There was a long tubular device Milo called a tanning bed. It was perfect for what they needed to do. Kaz picked up the struggling sentient, ignoring the pain in his shoulder from the gunshot wound. He tossed the man roughly onto the tanning bed. More shirts hung from the wall in a neat row, a display of some kind.
Make me more ropes,
Kaz said, using his chin to gesture at the shirts as Milo dashed into the room with a lantern. Milo shredded a few shirts with his knife. Kaz put all his weight on the struggling sentient. The zombie was strong. Pinning him to the tanning bed took all of Kaz's effort. He wrestled the man onto his stomach to keep his gnashing teeth out of range. Never in his life had he been so grateful for his height and strength.
Secure him, Kaz ordered. Hurry!
Milo ran over with the torn shirts, tying them together to make a rope. Minutes later, their prisoner was tied face down inside the cylindrical device. He screamed into his gag, teeth sawing at the fabric. He just might manage to chew through it if given enough time. Kaz didn't plan to give him enough time. Boy Scout. Milo straightened as he finished the last knot. I could tie knots better than anyone in my troop. Kaz had no idea what he was talking about and didn't care. He drew his knife.
We have to work fast before another patrol comes along. Are you ready?
Milo licked his lips, eyes bright. It was anticipation that lit the American's eyes, and it was uncomfortable to witness. Ready, Milo breathed. Can I start with his scalp?
Duh.
Kaz met the sentient's red eyes as they bulged in their socket.
Start with his scalp.
He rested the tip of his knife against the sentient's cheek.
Tell me when you are ready to talk,
he said in Russian.
I will cut your gag when you are ready to tell me what I want to know. First of all, I need the exact location of the Livermore headquarters.
He nodded at Milo. Grinning, eyes still lit with a demonic light, Milo began tracing the edge of his knife across the top of the sentient's forehead. They were done in less than 30 minutes. When Milo and Kaz returned to the parking lot, a fresh scalp hung from Milo's belt. It probably dripped with blood, but it was lost in the rest of the blood that spattered his uniform. Mikhail broke free of Valentina and raced across the pavement. Kaz was stunned when the boy grabbed onto the leg of his pants.
"Is he dead?"
Somber eyes looked up at him through greasy blonde hair.
"Da, he's dead."
Kaz wasn't sure how he felt about admitting to brutal, cold-blooded murder, but there was no other way to explain the screaming, or the blood that made dark spots all over his shirt.
"He's the kind that killed Mama?"
Mikhail asked.
"Da, he is the kind who killed your mother."
"Fucker!" Mikhail spat on the ground.
"I hope he died in pain."
His words were full of vehemence and hatred. Kaz had remained untouched by the violence he and Milo committed in the tanning salon. Not once had he wavered in the gruesome task, not even when Milo had cut off several of the screaming man's fingers for souvenirs. Seeing Mikhail desensitized to the violence sent a jolt through Kaz. He crouched down in front of the child. Even in this position, he still towered over him.
"What I did was a bad thing," Kaz said.
"But you killed him. That's what he deserved."
"It was a necessary action," Kaz replied. "I am sorry for this war, Mikhail. I wish you did not have to live through it. This is not what life is supposed to be like. You should be playing with your friends, not—"
"I am strong." Mikhail stood up a little straighter. His hand went unconsciously to his belt knife.
"Jennifer says so."
Kaz stared at the boy. His mind drifted back to a time long ago when he and Polina had attended his father's funeral. Alexander had only been a few months old.
"My father had a hard life,"
Kaz had said, full of sorrow by the sight of his father's cloth-wrapped body.
"Do not grieve for him, my love," Polina had replied. "His life had purpose. I believe he died happy, knowing he did his part for the betterment of all."
For the betterment of all. Kaz had grown up with that slogan, as had Polina. They had passed it on to Alexander even before he was old enough to understand what they said. Kaz used to believe that meant working long, hard hours to create things to help destroy America and advance the interests of Mother Russia. He believed it meant killing innocent people to accelerate testing. He believed it meant doing whatever had to be done for the long-term goal. As he watched Mikhail gripping his knife, he thought, "I need to make the world better for him." So Mikhail wouldn't have to grow up thinking it was normal and justified to do what Kaz and Milo had just done. So children like Mikhail all over the world would not have to grow up sleeping with a knife instead of a stuffed toy.
"I will do this, Polina," he said silently. "Whatever time I have left on this earth will be spent trying to make things better."
What is he doing?" Julie's high-pitched squeal pulled Kaz out of his head and back into the dark parking lot. He turned and found Milo crouched beside the two young mutants, who had dragged their carcass into sight. They slurped brains from bloody hands while Milo, humming to himself, worked his knife blade around what remained of the man's scalp.
"Get into the jeep,"
Kaz said to the women. He gave Mikhail a push, gesturing for him to follow.
"Lena, the Soviet entrance to the headquarters is located on 4th Street and South Livermore Avenue. Can you please find the route on the map for Milo? I'll join all of you in a minute."
He waited until they were all in the jeep.
"Milo."
Cause approached the man as he continued to hum. The mutant snarled at him, warning him to stop before he got too close.
Milo.
Yeah? The knife slid under the scalp, beginning the process of separating it from the head.
You have a mission to complete.
I know, man. Milo let out a soft grunt of satisfaction as the scalp came free in his hands. He held it up under the sparse moonlight, turning it to admire it. Blood dripped off the end of his knife. I just gotta take care of these guys first. The fingers of his knife hand flicked in the direction of the last body, which was in the possession of Daryl.
There is no time,
Cause said.
You must go now.
Milo ignored him, fastening the new scalp to his belt. There's always enough time for this. Don't worry, I'll send the Soviet compound to hell in a handbasket.
Milo, we need to leave. Now!
Cause let the full power of his voice vibrate through the night. Milo jerked as though Cause had slapped him. Master Sergeant, just one more, please. You know I need it. Master Sergeant? Cause remembered Master Sergeant Conaway sending Milo out for popcorn the night he'd died. He also realized that asking Milo to help him torture information out of the sentient might have snapped a mind already made fragile. There was no time to put the poor bastard back together. Cause could not spend half the night arguing with him, nor could they waste any more time. So he did the next best thing.
I'll get the scalp from the fat one,
Cause said.
You look at the map with Lena. Then you go into the tank with the mutants. Agreed?
Agreed. Milo drifted away, once again humming to himself. Cause strode over to the body of the fat sentient. His round cheeks were marred by dark gray patches. Daryl growled a warning at him, reaching his hand into the skull to pull out another handful of brains. Stand down, Burn, Milo snapped. He doesn't want your fucking brains. Daryl growled again, but took a few steps back. Cause drew his knife and placed it against the temple of the dead body and slid it beneath the skin of his hairline. It didn't bother him to do it, but it did bother him that the others saw him. He really was a monster. The broken, bloody body in the tanning salon was undeniable. The blood on his hands would never truly be washed away. The only difference between himself and Milo was that Milo's mind had broken. Cause had done things far worse for far longer than the things he had done tonight. And he'd done it all without feeling a thing. He was still standing, still coherent, still living. He should go with Milo and sacrifice himself. That would be a fitting end for a monster such as himself. But then there would be no one to make the gas needed to destroy the sentience.
Polina, he thought, I don't want to be a monster anymore. Help me. Help me to do something good in the world. Help me make this a world where Mikhail will not grow up to be like me.
Chapter 45. Infiltrate. They made it out of town without any further incident. The road to the lab twisted through dark hills dotted with mature oak trees. When sharp angles of the lab broke the rolling landscape, they pulled the jeep over to the side of the road, tucking into a cluster of trees. If anyone happened by, they would appear to be just another shadow. Time for the next part of their plan. Valentina pulled out a coil of rope they'd brought from the hardware store. Cause set about binding the wrists of the four women.
Is it too tight?
Cause asked as he finished securing the knots around Valentina's wrists. She sniffed. I'm fine. This has to look convincing. If I didn't trust you, Amanda said, I'd worry you might be setting us up. Her voice was higher than usual, telling him just how nervous she was about this part of the plan. He met her eyes so she would see his sincerity.
I would sooner turn myself over to the KGB than let them get their hands on any of you.
Amanda relaxed a little, giving him an apologetic smile. I know you would. I just don't like being tied up. In Russian he said,
Mikhail, you must hide in the back.
Kaz pulled out a large tarp from the hardware store, tucking it around the boxes and tanks of propane. Mikhail crawled inside and wedged himself between the supplies and the side of the Jeep.
Are you sure you want to do this? Kaz asked. One of the others can take your place.
I would do it, Mikhail said. I will avenge my mama and papa. I want to hurt the fuckers. What did he say? Valentina asked sharply.
Just a Russian phrase.
He was going to have to talk to Jennifer again about her language. To Mikhail he said,
Remember not to use that word around Nona. It makes her very angry.
Oh. Mikhail hunched his shoulders, suddenly looking like a little boy again. I didn't know.
It's all right.
Kaz tousled his hair.
You must be stealthy when we reach the lab. Whatever you do, do not let yourself be seen. You strike, and then you run. Understand? If anything goes wrong, run as fast as you can and hide. Don't let the zombies catch you.
Mikhail nodded and tugged the tarp down over his head. Kaz returned to the driver's seat. There was nothing to do now but wait. Crickets and frogs filled the night around them with song. A creek flowed somewhere nearby. Think he can pull it off? Lena's voice was quiet in the darkness. He'll do it, Valentina said. That man is single-minded. Kaz didn't say anything. Nervous energy coursed through him. He'd never been one for sitting around. He got out of the car and circled around it one last time, making sure everything was in place. He peeked under the tarp to check on Mikhail. Doubt hounded him. It was risky to take the boy. It was risky for everyone involved. Should he leave Mikhail? He could hide under the trees and wait for someone to come and get him. He's safer with us, Valentina said. She'd seen the concern on his face and read it clearly. We can't protect him if he's not with us.
If our plan fails, he could become sentient food, Kaz said.
He could be sentient food if we leave him out here unprotected, Valentina replied. She sighed, and for a brief second, Kaz saw a tired old woman. Nowhere is safe, Victor. She was right. Kaz scrubbed a hand through his hair. There was no good choice for Mikhail, not so long as the war continued. A distant boom caught his ears. Kaz turned toward the sound. It came from somewhere in Livermore. Could it be Milo? Had he and the mutants? A flare shot into the sky, a flaming red tip hovering in the dark like a single demon's eye before flaming out. Kaz hustled back to the driver's seat. More explosions rocked the city. Through the leaves of the trees, smoke and fire could be seen. A minute went by. 2 minutes. More mayhem from the city as the fire spread and more explosions shook the ground. Where are they? Kaz tightened his grip on the steering wheel. Where were the reinforcements from the lab? There had to be reinforcements. If Petrov was in Livermore, as he suspected, there would be more troops. The man was nothing if not thorough. The crickets and frogs seemed to get louder, their sounds overlaid by the battle breaking out in the town below them. Where are they? Just when he began to think he'd been mistaken, a pair of headlights appeared on the road. Then another, and then another. No less than 11 jeeps, all of them laden with sentience, roared past them. None of them even glanced in the direction of the oak trees where they hid. "Think that was all of them?" Amanda asked after the last one sped by. Cos didn't reply. He waited another minute in the darkness, listening. "I hate the idea of sending all those sentients into the city where our friends are," Julie whispered. The sound of distant gunfire grew louder as the battle spread.
"It's the best way to clear out the lab for us," Cos replied. "Otherwise, we would stand no chance."
The odds were stacked against them anyway.
"I think it's clear."
He turned to look at his companions.
"Are you ready for this?"
"Ready to break into a Soviet lab occupied by sentients?" Julie said. "Not really." "There is no being ready," Valentina said. "The time is now. We must act." As Cos turned the key in the engine, he heard Lena murmur, "Leo, you better hurry. Get your ass to the lab with our reinforcements." Chapter 46. Be Aggressive. Jennifer and her team waited in a preschool parking lot 5 blocks away from the first of the human cattle pens. They had 2 of the jeeps Cos's team had secured for them at the checkpoint, plus Leo's truck. Jennifer sat behind the wheel of a blue Volvo station wagon they'd found on their way here. Now everyone sat in their respective vehicles waiting for the signal from Milo. The guy was supposed to take the tank straight into the downtown headquarters and hit the Soviets with everything he had, which included his mutant family. It was a twisted way to put them all to rest, but Jennifer didn't think it was a bad way to go out. A twinge of uneasiness went through her. The plan had been for them to secure a sentient at the initial checkpoint and torture him for information on the lab and the downtown headquarters, but the mutants had ruined that plan by killing all the sentients. After that, they were supposed to load up on supplies from a hardware store before splitting up. Milo and the mutants would go one way to attack the sentient headquarters. Cos and the rest of the group would continue on to the lab. How was Milo supposed to find the headquarters? He wasn't exactly in his right mind to begin with. "Don't think like that," she scolded herself, attempting to make herself feel more optimistic. "Cos will figure something out." She had never been good at pep talks. Even when she'd been a cheerleader, the rhymes and chants had seemed so stupid at times. Be aggressive, B-E aggressive, B-E-A-G-R-E-S-S-I-V-E, be aggressive. Or, our team is red hot, our team is red hot, our team is R-E-D-H-O-T. Once we start, we can't be stopped. Let's go, let's go. She leaned her head back against the seat rest and briefly closed her eyes. It was a wonder she had ever faked her enthusiasm enough to make the cheer squad. She'd only tried out as an excuse to be away from home. Her schedule had already been busy with homework and gymnastics. The last thing she needed was another extracurricular activity, but the team practiced on evenings and weekends. It was an easy way to get away from her dad. Where was her asshole father these days? He was probably dead. She hadn't cared enough to go home when the invasion happened. It was why she had gone to Leo's instead. Sure, she'd made up some story about the roads not being safe, but the truth was that she'd gone out of her way to get to the Chiquino farm when she failed to get to Cassie at the Nielsen's. The idea of being trapped in a house with her father in the middle of a Soviet invasion had almost been enough to put her over the edge. She would never admit it out loud, but Leo made her feel safe back in high school. He'd been a place of safety and security when she'd been unraveling from the inside. He would never know just how much he'd helped her back then. The night they'd first slept together, in the back of his pickup truck on a blanket beneath the limbs of Gravenstein apple trees, had changed everything for her. When he'd touched her, he hadn't looked at her the way her dad looked at her. The love and tenderness and devotion she saw in his eyes both terrified and thrilled her. When she looked into her dad's eyes, she only saw darkness. The memory of it filled her mouth with a metallic taste she had come to associate with fear. The juxtaposition of Leo's tenderness against the fear she felt every time Dad's shape filled her doorway is what finally gave her the strength to fight back. She glanced out the open window of her Volvo to where Leo sat in the truck, his thumbs tapping out nervous energy on the steering wheel. He used to tap like that on her leg when they'd ridden the bus to football games. It was a sure sign he was nervous. She smiled to herself. He might be nervous now, but Leo always came through in a crisis. The higher the stakes, the more important the game, the better he did. It was his superpower, one of many. A loud boom echoed through the night, followed by the long wail of a siren. Jennifer jerked upright, heart pounding. Had that been Milo's signal, or something else? Had one of the other sniper teams? A red flare soared into the night, leaving a long trail of smoke in its wake. That was it, Milo's signal. He was attacking the downtown headquarters with the tank and his mutants. Jennifer turned the key in the ignition, pumping her foot on the gas pedal. The blue Volvo revved to life. Around her in the parking lot, the guys turned on their vehicles. They sped onto the road, heading for the human cattle pen. Chapter 47. Freedom Fight. Jennifer slammed on the brakes, her Volvo burning rubber as she ground to a halt beside the chain-link fence surrounding the high school football field. Sticking her head out of the open window, she shouted, "Get out of the way!" She waved a grenade back and forth through the air before pulling the pin. "Get out of the fucking way! I'm blowing the fence!" The mass of people behind the fence heaved and scattered. Jennifer flung the grenade, dropped back into the driver's seat, and threw the station wagon into reverse. She was 20 feet away and still moving when the grenade detonated. Dirt and metal fencing flew in every direction. A piece of shrapnel hit the windshield and cracked the glass. Smaller pieces pinged off the grille and front hood of the car. A wad of people flooded into the street. More explosions rocked the area as Leo, Chop Shop, and Spill blew holes in other parts of the fence. She jumped out of the car and threw open the trunk. A mound of weapons filled the back. It was everything the snipers had scavenged from the Soviets who'd attacked the Chiquino cabin, plus what Kaz had brought with the stolen tank from Rossi. "Fight back!" Jennifer grabbed a machine gun and shoved it into the hands of the first person who passed her, a girl about her own age. "Fight for your freedom!" The girl stared at the machine gun in her hands, eyes wide. Jennifer gave her a nod of encouragement before turning her attention to a man who ran by with 2 kids in tow. She pushed a machine gun at him. "Fight for your kids," she said. "Take back your freedom." Looking at the kids, she added another 2 grenades to the man's arsenal. "Keep them safe." "Thank you." His expression was grim as he dropped the grenades into his bulky cargo pants and led the kids away. "Fight for your freedom!" Jennifer held up 2 machine guns, waving them in the air to get people's attention. "Kill the Soviet bastards!" People rushed toward her car. Jennifer handed out weapons to anyone who wanted them. As she gave a gun to a tall African-American woman in jeans, screams went up behind her. Something loud thumped onto the car. She spun around and found a sentient charging across the roof. Fresh blood smeared his mouth and jaw. More blood stained the front of his uniform. Red eyes fixed on Jennifer as he charged. She planted her feet and fired. The woman in blue jeans took up a position beside her and fired the machine gun Jennifer had just given her. They blew the Soviet's head open. He skidded across the top of the Volvo and slid off the back, landing in a heap on the ground beside Jennifer's sneakers. 20 feet from the Volvo, a group of people scattered as bullets rained down into their midst. A few fell from the assault. Jennifer followed the trail of bullets and spotted 2 Soviets crouched on the rooftop of a school building. They fired down on the terrified, stampeding people. Jennifer raced in the direction of the building. She wasn't a true marksman like Leo, Dal, or Anton. She couldn't hit a target from 100 yards away. If she wanted to take the sentients on the top of the classroom, she had to get close enough to make a headshot, which meant putting herself in their line of sight. But she didn't give a fuck. "Fight back!" She made one last gesture at the pile of weapons in the back of the Volvo. "Take weapons and fight back!" Grabbing 2 grenades, she raced toward the sentients on the classroom roof. She was halfway in her sprint across the road when she realized the African-American woman was by her side. "Officer Bernice Jackson," the woman huffed. "Who are you?" "A police officer. How about that for good luck?" "My name is Jennifer." They dropped behind a dumpster on the edge of the parking lot. Bullets pinged off the metal bin as the Soviets fired at them. "You have training?" Bernice asked, crouched with her back against the dumpster. "Not much," Jennifer replied. "I had my first lesson after the invasion." "You don't look old enough to use that." Bernice gestured to the machine gun. "Neither do you." Bernice surprised her by flashing a grin. "Let's show these bastards what we're made of." They popped out on either side of the dumpster and fired at the rooftop Soviets. The assholes threw themselves flat as soon as the women opened fire. Jennifer and Bernice regrouped behind the dumpster. More bullets pinged off it. "How's your throwing arm?" Bernice pointed to the grenades bulging in the pockets of Jennifer's uniform pants. "Think you can land one of those on the rooftop?" "Yeah, I can." She'd never played softball, but she had a decent throwing arm. "You throw the grenade," Bernice said. "Blow the roof out from under them. I'll shoot them as soon as they're down." "Okay." Jennifer fished the grenades out of her pants. "On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3." She popped out from behind the dumpster and sprinted straight for the classroom. Fleeing people surrounded her on all sides as they blindly fled the football field. Bullets hit the ground near her feet. A man dropped just to her left, taken out by the sentients. Adrenaline spiked through her as she pulled the pin from the grenade. She flung it as hard as she could. It arched over the heads of the fleeing people and landed on the roof. Jennifer kept running, getting even closer to the building as she pulled out the second grenade. She flung it just as the first grenade detonated. She dropped to the ground as the building rocked with the explosion, covering her head with her hands. Something large hit the side of her ribcage. Flying debris burned across her exposed skin. People screamed in terror. Jennifer shifted into a crouch. People cut a wide berth around the ruined side of the classroom. A tall figure raced past her. Bernice. She charged into the rubble with her gun. Through the cloud of settling debris, Jennifer spotted the sentients. They were still alive, moving amid the rubble. Bernice killed the first one while he was still on the ground. The second sentient tackled her from the side. Her gun fired wildly as they hit the ground. Jennifer raced for them, letting her machine gun bounce against her hips as she drew her knife. Bernice was on her back. She gripped both ends of her gun, straining against the collarbone of the sentient who had pinned her to the ground. His hands tightened around either side of her skull as he tried to smash open her head. Jennifer leaped over a mound of sheetrock and the remains of a desk, landing beside Bernice and the sentient. Wrapping both hands around the hilt of the knife, she struck. The hunting knife hit the back of the Soviet's skull. She felt the resistance of the bone and threw all her strength into the blow. Leverage was on her side. The knife resisted for a split second before sliding through the skull. The sentient collapsed on top of Bernice, blood streaming from his head. Jennifer shoved the body aside. Bernice blinked up at her, wiping blood from her face with the back of her hand. "Damn," she said. "You might be small, but I'd hate to go up against you in a fight." Despite the situation, Jennifer felt herself grinning. She offered Bernice a hand up. The other woman took it, allowing herself to be pulled to her feet. A cheer went up behind them, followed by gunfire. The women turned. Several dead sentients had been hoisted into the air by the crowd of people. They were carried toward the flagpole at the edge of the football field. A burly man, the father she'd given the gun and grenades to, wrapped the rope around the neck of a sentient and began hoisting the body up the flagpole. Jennifer stopped, watching the scene unfold. Her eyes traveled over the sea of people. There were no more sentients. There had been only half a dozen on patrol around the pen, but now they were all dead. It had been Milo's idea to free the people and give them weapons. His plan had worked. She hoped Dal's team fared as well at the second cattle pen. There had been casualties among the Americans. 2 people in blue hospital scrubs gathered the dead and wounded on the sidewalk. How many of them had been bitten? Jennifer's mouth tightened at the thought. Any who had been bitten would have to be put down. Her mind flashed back to Cassie, when her sister had held up the hand that had been bitten by the sentient. A shiver went through her. Jennifer turned away from the wounded. It was almost more than she could take. She focused instead on the string of bodies that dangled from the tall flagpole. More cheers went up from the people as the burly man shoved a gun into the air and fired triumphantly. Other people joined him, firing into the air. A truck moved through the crowd. Leo's truck, Jennifer realized. People parted for him with more cheers. Leo thrust one arm out of the truck, fist punching the sky in a gesture of victory. She'd seen him do the same thing on the football field. It had the same effect on the people here as it had on teenage students back in high school. A wave of cheers and stomping feet rippled out from around him. He reached the flagpole and stopped the truck. The crowd surged forward as he climbed on top of the truck. He thrust his fist into the air, calling, "Long live America!" He repeated the chant, fist rising and falling with the cadence. "Who is that guy?" Bernice asked. "He's fucking hot." An amused smile tugged at Jennifer's lips. Leo had that effect on women. "He's the leader of the snipers. His name is Leo. Have you heard of us?" "Hell yes, I've heard of the snipers." Bernice gave her an appraising look. "You're a sniper?" "Yeah." "No wonder you're such a badass." Bernice nodded in approval. "Is DJ Sniper here?" She scanned the crowd around Leo. "There's a second prison ground. Dal, DJ Sniper, is leading a team to free the people there. Another group of our people is attacking the downtown headquarters with a tank we stole." As if to emphasize her words, an explosion rocked the ground beneath their feet. A huge fireball went up into the air from the direction of downtown. If Jennifer didn't know better, she would have said Milo had blown up a gas station or a propane tank. A second fireball followed the first, filling the dark sky with orange light. Screams and distant chatter followed. "You guys are fucking badass," Bernice said. "Can I join you? I'm ready to kill some Soviet fuckers." "Hell yeah, you can join us," Jennifer said. "We're gathering a team to—" She broke off as Leo, still on top of the truck, held up his arms and gestured for silence. A hush fell over the field. A sensation went through her. Seeing Leo on the top of the truck cab, king of the football field, was like déjà vu. Except this was no high school football game. The stakes had never been higher. "My name is Leo Cecchino." His voice carried easily over the crowd. "I am the leader of the Snipers, a resistance group from West County." A ripple went through the people. Jennifer saw awe in many of the faces, just like she had in Bernice's eyes when she realized she'd been rescued by the snipers.
"We're here on an important mission," Leo said, "and we need your help. Right now, a small team of snipers has infiltrated the Livermore lab. With them is a Russian defector who has the secret to defeating the Soviets and turning the tide of this war. As you all know, the Soviets have mutated. The zombie vaccine has turned many of them into super soldiers. You've all seen them. They are stronger and faster than any human should be, and they feed on human brains."
A dramatic pause as he let that sink in.
"They're turning people like you and me, into cattle," Leo continued. "We're being rounded up and turned into food for the invaders."
He paused and let an angry ripple move through the crowd.
"That's right. Not only have Russians invaded American soil and murdered us, they're now rounding us up and using us like livestock. If they aren't stopped, people across our country will become cattle for sentient zombies. Are we going to let them do that? Or are we going to take back our country?"
Angry shouts tore across the field. People thrust guns into the air, many of them shouting, "Take back our country!" Leo nodded, his gaze sweeping across the gathered mass.
"We need your help. Our Russian ally needs materials in the lab to create a weapon that can help us against the sentient zombies."
Across town, Dal should be giving this same speech right about now.
"Our team in the lab is outnumbered," Leo said. "If we're going to take back our country, we need your help. We need people willing to go with us to the lab and fight. We need to take the lab and kill every last Soviet. Once the lab is ours, we'll set up a production line. We'll make this weapon and get it out there. But we can't do it without you. We need you to join us in the fight. We need you to take the weapons we've given you tonight. Find cars and come with us. Help us take the lab. Help us take a lab so we can save this country. Who's with us?"
Leo thrust his gun into the air, his other arm thrown wide as he invited the crowd to answer. A deafening roar swept through the field. It was louder than anything Jennifer had ever heard before. It was all somehow so fitting. Leo had always been a leader on the field. Apparently, it didn't matter if he was leading teenage jocks or desperate people in the middle of a war. He was still a natural. Jennifer hustled back to the Volvo and leaped nimbly atop.
"Fight for freedom,"
she shouted, raising her gun into the air just as Leo had done.
"Fight for freedom and kill the invaders."
Her gun was also thrust into the air.
"Fight for freedom!"
The cry echoed across the field. Guns and fists went into the air. Over the distance, she felt Leo's gaze settle on her. It reminded her oddly of the night they'd been crowned homecoming king and queen. The applause from the gathered people, all eyes on the two of them. "We've come a long way, Leo Cicchino," she thought. Chapter 48. Infiltration. Cos drove up to the security gate of the Lawrence Livermore lab, heart pounding in his chest. A soldier came out of the guard shack, casually holding his machine gun. In the lights of the Jeep, it was easy to see he was a sentient. Large gray patches covered his face and neck. The red eyes glinted. Cos prepared himself, mentally taking himself back to the lab in Russia. He snatched pieces of the cause he had been. The focused, blind patriot. The unfeeling, unquestioning man who did whatever he was ordered in the name of the motherland. He felt himself hardening from the inside out, becoming an older version of himself.
"Glory to the motherland,"
he said sharply, expression flat as he met that of the sentients.
"Glory to the motherland."
The sentient's nostrils flared. He was scenting the air, perhaps trying to detect if Kaz was also a sentient.
Tell General Petrov that Viktor Kozlovovich has brought him a gift.
Kaz jerked his chin in the direction of his prisoners. They played their parts well. Valentina and the others hunched in their seats, appearing too frightened to look up. They were dirty and blood-smeared from the long journey here, making them look like Kaz had dragged them through the gutter.
What sort of gift?
The sentient came closer, eyes narrowing as he studied Kaz. The man looked directly at his head, at his brains. He'd obviously figured out Kaz wasn't a sentient. His free hand slid casually toward the hammer he wore at his belt.
Don't even think of it, you piece of filth,
Kaz snarled.
You stand here with your superior strength because of me. I dedicated my life to Nezhet virus. You call General Petrov right now and tell him Viktor Kozlovovich is here with a gift. I didn't make it through the hell down there.
He jabbed a finger toward the blaze spreading through downtown.
Just to deal with your shit. Call the general now.
This took the man aback. He blinked, staring uneasily at Kaz.
Call him,
Kaz ordered, silently praying he hadn't made a massive miscalculation. If Petrov wasn't here and this guard sounded the alarm, they'd all be sentient food.
Trust me when I say he wants these prisoners. Have you heard of the snipers?
Hesitation crept into the sentry's posture.
The snipers are in the north. They were in the north,
Kaz shot back.
Some of them still are.
He leaned forward, glaring at the man.
And some of them are right here.
Fear got the better of the sentry. Mouth tightening, he hurried into the security shack and picked up the phone. Air whooshed out of Kaz's throat. General Petrov really was here. The knowledge made his adrenaline hammer even harder than before. His hands tightened on the steering wheel of the Jeep, his grip so firm the plastic and rubber creaked. The sentry's lips moved as he spoke into the phone. His eyes flicked a few times in Kaz's direction. Finally, he nodded and hung up. The security gate began to swing open. Kaz's heart beat even faster as the next part of the plan came into play. Dread made sweat break out across his temples. The sentry came back out of the shack.
The general said you were not expected.
His suspicion had been replaced with perfect courtesy. Petrov probably threatened the man within an inch of his life.
Lucky for you, you fit the description of Viktor Kozlovovich. I need to verify the contents of your vehicle first. Ow!
The sentient reeled backward, shock plain on his face. Kaz acted fast. Taking advantage of the distraction, he delivered a hard blow with the knife edge of his hand to the sentient's nose, just as Milo had instructed them in practice. The sentient reeled backwards, both hands going to his nose as blood gushed out. Kaz shoved open the driver's side door, hitting the sentient. He stumbled backwards and tripped over his feet. Kaz pounced, jumping out of the car and bearing down on the sentient. He slammed his boot heel into the man's already wounded nose. A soft crunch sounded. Never hesitating, Kaz grabbed the knife that stuck out of the boot, a gift from Mikhail. With one decisive strike, he drove the blade through the sentient's eye. The zombie shuddered once before going still. Kaz's breath rasped between his lips. Mikhail wriggled out from under the Jeep where he'd been hiding. He grabbed the sentient's feet and looked up, waiting. Kaz swallowed his adrenaline and grabbed the sentient's wrists. He and Mikhail dragged the body toward a low hedge that grew in front of the chain-link fence that surrounded the lab.
I've got him,
Cos lifted up the body and dumped it behind the hedge.
You did well, Mikhail.
I killed a fucker.
Mikhail's mouth was pressed into a firm line.
Da, you did. You were very brave.
No matter that Cos had almost given himself a heart attack worrying about the position he'd put the boy in. In the jeep, Valentina and the others had cut themselves loose. Julie had pulled the vehicle just inside the gate. Amanda was in the security shack, smashing the security camera with the butt of her gun. They left the gate open for Leo when he arrived with the troops. Cos drove up the long driveway that led into the massive facility. Thanks to the distraction from Milo and his mutants, the main boulevard stood empty. There wasn't a soul in sight. Thank you, Milo, Cos thought.
Do you know where you're going?
Valentina asked. Cos nodded.
I got directions.
Or rather, Milo had gotten the necessary directions when he cut off the sentient's fingers in the tanning salon, after he had scalped him. As Cos turned onto a narrow street between two tan-colored buildings, he was seized with an overwhelming urge to throw the mission aside and find Petrov. The desire was so strong, he slowed the jeep without realizing he did so. His breath came hard and fast. All he could see was Petrov's face, with his hands wrapped around the general's throat.
Victor,
Valentina spoke sharply, urgently.
Why are you slowing down?
Cos shook himself, trying to focus on his surroundings. They had less than 10 minutes before Petrov guessed something was amiss, perhaps less.
Do the right thing, Kozlovovich, he told himself.
For Polina, for Alexander, for everyone you've ever murdered. He sped up, driving deeper into the lab compound, leaving the temptation of Petrov behind. Chapter 49. Caravan. Jennifer leaned hard on the accelerator. The Volvo charged up a dark road that snaked through the hills. The lights of the Livermore lab filled the windshield. Bernice sat in the passenger seat. In the back were two guys and another woman, all volunteers from the football field. They were armed and ready to fight. Behind the Volvo was a string of vehicles filled with volunteers like the ones who rode with Jennifer. Leo's speech had rallied over 100 fighters. Not everyone had joined them, of course. There were some who were too frightened or stayed behind with their children. But they had more fighters than Jennifer had dreamed possible. Dell met them on the road to the lab, leading another group of nearly 100 fighters. Fucking Milo, Jennifer thought in admiration. His plan had been a good one. Despite being a tragic whack job, the guy had hatched a good strategy, and his diversion had been nothing short of brilliant. Sounds of conflict from downtown Livermore had faded, though a handful of buildings had caught fire. Flames licked at the black sky while smoke covered the streets. Any sentients left in Livermore would be busy trying to put it out while the snipers moved in on the lab. This was the weakest part of their plan. They would storm the campus and raise holy hell to buy Cos the time he needed to manufacture the gas. With any luck, he would release the gas before the sentients gained the upper hand. Cindy, Jennifer spoke to the middle-aged woman in the back seat of the car. There had been a number of lab employees among the prisoners they had rescued, Cindy included. She'd been a receptionist. Yeah. What kind of fencing is around the lab? Chain link with barbed wire on top. It goes around the entire facility. Do you have any idea how many sentients are housed in the facility? Jennifer asked. I wasn't on shift when the invasion happened, Cindy replied. My daughter caught the flu, and I took the day off to take care of her. She fell silent for a moment. Jennifer guessed her daughter had died. Otherwise, Cindy would not be with her, not here preparing to storm a Soviet stronghold. I don't know how many are in the lab, but before I was captured, I saw a lot of cars coming and going from the area. Where do you think we should go to find the sentients inside? Cindy considered the question. Assuming they don't come to us, I say we should go to the fire station. There are bedrooms there for the firefighters who work there. If I was going to house soldiers somewhere, that's where it would be. It's on the southeast corner of the facility. I'll guide you there. Jennifer glanced in the rearview mirror at the two men who rode in the back. Neither seemed disturbed by the idea of going to look for a fight with the sentients. Good. That meant she had the right people with her. How old are you? Bernice asked. 20? Bernice raised an appreciative eyebrow. You might want to consider law enforcement as a career. I know a lot of police officers with smaller balls than you. Jennifer chuckled, as did everyone else in the car. Bernice, that is the first time someone has complimented a body part I don't actually own. Bernice gave her a grin. I call it as I see it. The road curved. As Jennifer leaned into the turn, the lab entrance came into view. There was a chain-link gate on wheels, and it was wide open for them. Jennifer grinned to herself. Cause's team had been charged with disarming the guards in the kiosk and leaving the gate open. That meant they'd made it and were somewhere inside, hopefully making a shit ton of gas bombs to loose on the sentients. Ahead of her, Leo led the caravan. His truck picked up speed, accelerating straight for the open gate. Chop Shop stood in the passenger side window, training his gun on the lab. Is that an alarm? Cindy rolled down her window. The sound of a wailing siren floated into the car. Someone sounded the alarm inside. Shit! Jennifer tightened her grip on the steering wheel. The alarm could signal a lot of things. Someone could have spotted the caravan. It could have been triggered when Milo attacked the downtown headquarters. Or someone could have figured out Cause's group had infiltrated the grounds. Whatever the reason for the alarm, it wasn't good. She sped up, keeping pace with Leo's truck. As they passed the security shack, she saw it was empty. They entered the lab compound. Low, tan buildings lined the road on either side of them. The windows, set high into the walls, were all dark. There wasn't a sentient in sight. The absence of the enemy seemed to be punctuated by the wailing alarm in the background. Cause. The big Russian had better be all right. She would kick his ass if he let himself get hurt. Tell me how to get to the fire station, Jennifer said. As Cindy gave directions, Jennifer veered away from Leo's truck. She met his eye as she turned right, and he kept going forward. It was a brief second, over almost as soon as it started. As she sped away deeper into the lab, it occurred to her that it might be the last time they ever saw each other. There was no telling who would survive the battle this night and who would become sentient food. Jennifer clenched her jaw. This is for you, Cassie, she thought. I'm going to kill every last zombie fucker I can get in my crosshairs. Chapter 50. One of Us.
Is this it? Cause asked. The Einstein building.
It looked remarkably like all the other buildings, tan on the outside with low shrubs lining the side. It sat near the northwest corner of the lab compound. The only thing that distinguished it from the other buildings was the roll-up door at the far end. Amanda pointed to the large white letters hanging next to the door. It says Einstein Building right there. What's the plan? Julie asked.
Everyone grab a box from the back of the Jeep, Cause said. We go in through the back and find their storage rooms. Valentina, please get the flashlight.
She nodded as everyone piled out of the Jeep. Mikhail, Lena, Amanda, Julie, and Cause all grabbed boxes from the back. Glass jars clinked inside.
"What about the propane tanks?"
Julie asked.
"Those are for later,"
Cause said. They would be needed when the battle for the compound began. Lucky for them, the Einstein building lay near the periphery of the compound, away from the bright lights in the center where Petrov was stationed. It also meant there were no guards about. Everyone's attention was focused on the unfolding melee in the town, where Leo, Dal, and Milo waged their 3 separate attacks. With any luck, if a patrol came this way, they wouldn't look twice at the Soviet jeep parked outside the building. The back door was locked, but a small rectangle of glass sat just above the doorknob. Cause used the butt of his machine gun to smash it. He cleared the remnants away with his elbow, then reached inside and opened it. The interior of the building was musty and cold, as though the doors hadn't been opened in weeks. Perhaps it had been shut up since the invasion. There was another underlying smell. It was a subtle aroma, but having spent his life in a lab, Cause recognized it right away. It was the astringent, acrid scent that could only belong to a chemical storage area. He led the way into the building. Metal placards hung next to each of the doors along the corridor. "These are lab workrooms," Lena pointed to the nearest placard. "That says Lab A." Her gaze traveled to the next door. "That's Lab B."
"We are looking for a room where supplies are stored," Cause said. "Can you find this for me?"
The girls split up and hurried down the hall, scanning each door as they went. Cause brought up the rear with Mikhail and Valentina. Valentina held the large flashlight, moving it across the walls to illuminate the various placards. Small rectangular windows sat above the doorknobs of the laboratories. He paused in front of Lab B and peered through the window. A small light was on in a far corner, a green bulb that glowed on the bottom corner of some machine. It cast muddy light, just enough for Cause to make out the shapes of beakers, vials, and microscopes. "Is that what you're hoping to find?" Valentina asked.
"Yes."
The lab looked similar to his back in Russia.
"We can use the equipment to make the guess."
"Here it is." Lena stopped in front of a nondescript metal door and pointed. "This says, 'Chemical Storage, Authorized Personnel Only.'" "That's us," Julie muttered. "Authorized personnel." She wiggled the handle. It was locked. "Time for the big guns. Literally, everyone get back." They all took several steps back as Julie pointed her machine gun at the door handle. Cause instinctively reached for Mikhail, putting one arm around his shoulder and a hand up to shield his eyes. Mikhail wedged himself against Cause's leg, letting Cause shield him as Julie fired at the door. The knob clunked loudly to the linoleum floor. The smell of burned metal permeated the air. Julie kicked the door with her foot. It swung open on silent hinges. The smell of chemicals hit Cause in the face as soon as he passed through the doorway.
"This is the place."
He flicked the light switches. Double rows of fluorescents came on, revealing a long room lined with metal racks. It looked almost exactly like the storage room back in the Experimental Science Division. Containers with liquids of various colors filled several of the racks. The rest held large bags of powder. The materials he needed to make the gas had to be here. The problem was that everything was labeled in English. What made matters worse was that he had no idea how to translate ammonium nitrate and sevoflurane into English. When he'd taken English lessons from American prisoners, he hadn't thought to learn the names of chemicals. Even if he had, it was doubtful American soldiers would have known the words for such things.
Cos?
Julie's eyes widened as she took in his expression.
Oh, crap. You don't know the English names for the things we need, do you?
He gave a grim shake of his head.
I do not.
There was only one way through this problem. He would have to open bags and bottles and smell the contents.
I will find what we need,
he said.
You must find burners and large containers to boil water. Search the laboratories we passed. Gather everything you find in one room.
As the girls left, Cos drew his knife. Under normal circumstances, what he was about to do would be considered suicidal. There was no telling what he might encounter or accidentally expose himself to. But what option did they have? Hopefully, a lifetime of working with chemicals would be enough to keep him and everyone else safe.
You might want to stand a few feet back,
he said to Valentina.
Just in case.
Don't get yourself killed, Victor, she replied. The snipers need you in one piece. You're one of us now.
One of us. He'd once felt like he belonged to the experimental science division. When Petrov praised his work, he felt like he'd been contributing to something greater than himself, to Mother Russia herself. It was very different when Valentina said it. Cos didn't feel like he was adding anything to the greatness of the motherland. He didn't feel like he was a part of any land or country. He felt like he was part of a family. He turned away to hide the emotion that made his throat tight. He had a job to perform. The longer he stood around, the longer it would take to accomplish. And they had very little time to waste. As though to confirm this thought, an alarm began to wail. Petrov was coming for him.
Better work fast, Victor,
Valentina said grimly. Cos inserted his knife into the first bag, making a long slit in the side. When white powder spilled out, he raised his knife blade and took a careful sniff.